let's just sew whatever. Hello everybody, in today's video we are going to be making the Harmonica Hobo from Sincerely Jen Pattern Company. Such a fun bag to make. I can't wait to get templates for this. I do already have a video showing you how to cut it. If you haven't watched that yet, I would love it if you would. Such a cute pattern. Nice staple slip pocket and zipper pocket, and then outside zipper pocket as well. Comes together so fun, great for practicing your top stitching, and it's a nice slouchy bag. All right, let's get into it. We are gathered here today to make a Harmonica Hobo Bag from Sincerely Jen Patterns. I'm stoked. You're stoked. So let's do it. I am going to start off with my straps because my bobbins are full and I just find it easier to start there. So I've already pre-marked my center and I pre-taped during the cutting video, which you will be able to have already watched if you chose to. And then if you didn't choose to, you still could. The cool thing is it's always available. So, well, hopefully. So I am folding just barely into the center. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap so that my fabric has room to sit on top of itself. My stitch length is at a 4.5 or a 5, and I'm top stitching. Some machines may not actually be calibrated just right, so you may need to adjust your stitch length accordingly. And then we're just pivoting to sew across all 4 sides. And I am doing a little hand wheel knee lever action to get my needle to land exactly where I want it to. And then I'm going to trim off any excess vinyl. I don't usually worry about like strap ends, things like that. And so I'm gonna attach my snap hooks. This is just our main shoulder strap. And my preference is to cut that to 20 inches instead of 18. So that's what I've done. This would also look pretty cool with like a chain strap or something like that. So I'm just gonna fold this and clip it for now, and then I'll add some rivets in a bit. We'll set that aside. We'll work on the crossbody. I decided to use 3/4 inch wide tape because it's all I have at my cutting table. You would think that I could just replace the 1/2 inch. However, I haven't gotten around to it. I'm also very out of hardware at home, and I usually just place an order when I cut the bag out to pick up at work. So, yeah. The vinyl I'm using, if I didn't say it in the beginning, is from the Emporium, my friend Brittany. Is this Hex Reject file artwork, I think. It's so cute. I think I got this roll from her at Sew Expo in Washington earlier this year. That was so fun. So yeah, I've got it all taped. It's sticking together nicely. And then we're gonna fold this in half again and top stitch. Throw it over the old shoulder. I love top stitching, so I absolutely love this bag. Like, do I love top stitching straps? Not all day, every day. I've done that. But I just love the look of top stitching, especially as well. So this one is really fun, in my opinion. And if you don't find top stitching fun, this would be a great way to practice. Taking a lighter to the excess thread. And then for the crossbody strap, we can again just kind of clip everything together and rivet, or you could even sew things together if you wanted. And with vinyl, my preference is to use a wide mouth slide adjuster that I carry on my website. We carry 1 inch, 3/4, and 1.5 in the wide mouth. So when you're using vinyls, it's the way to go. And then I like to pick whatever side of my strap doesn't look as great, or you know, maybe you over or under folded one part. So I pick that, and that is the one that I'll stitch first. And I like to just do 2 rows of stitching with a jump thread, back stitching as I go. That is going to be plenty to hold. Now, that is going to depend on your thread as well. When I used to sell bags that I had made on a domestic with just really basic cotton thread, sometimes that didn't always hold depending on how thick the layers were and if the tension was actually engaged or not when those stitches were happening. So just keep that in mind. So we're going over and under the slide adjuster like that. Oh my gosh, this with rose gold is just gorgeous. So cute. And then we're gonna fold this end, and I will rivet that. I'll probably go ahead and add 2 rivets. You could also sew it if you'd rather, but yeah, I'll go ahead and add 2 rivets to that later when I rivet. So with our straps out of the way, I'm gonna start working on the exterior. So we're gonna need our mirrored main panel sets, our exterior pocket A pattern piece, and those 2 lining pieces. I was like, why is that not the same size? And then we're gonna need 1 of our zippers, which I guess I didn't pick out zipper. It's in there. It's in there. I'll take it. Have no choice. Okay. So this is going to be a 10-inch zipper. Give or take. My chair wheels get caught in the tile on the floor. Okay, we got our zipper pull attached. So pretty. But we're gonna top stitch these. And so these pieces come together in a way that you wouldn't normally think, because usually like a notched bottom has something that attaches to it, but here we're going to be attaching it to the short edges as well. So just go with it. And this is a 3/8 inch seam allowance throughout the pattern. If you want to decrease that stitch length, you can, but we are going to be top stitching this open. So as long as you're not using a literal basting stitch, should be fine. So we're gonna press that open. You can use tape if you want to, but usually just getting like a rolling, a seam roller or something like that can help. We're just gonna press that open and top stitch. You will see this top stitch, but the side top stitch you kind of won't, so just take your time. And I like to pivot across. And I am following the inside edge of my foot with that seam. So I am watching the seam as it goes next to the inner edge of my foot, and that's where I determine where that is. But I am using a very matching thread, so if things aren't perfect, be all right. And if you're using a thinner or stretchy material, just make sure you're not stretching anything while you're sewing, because then it creates like little wobbles or waves. Press that open. And if you want to make a version of this that maybe has the bottom and top piece but not this center seam, just go ahead and tape them together. So print out a second of that exterior panel, cut 3/8 of an inch off each one, and tape them together. And that's going to give you that bottom piece without the top stitching. All right, we're gonna grab a nameplate. And find the center wherever you'd like to add your nameplate. I'm gonna do 2.5 inches up from the bottom, and I measure out the width of my plate as it is centered. I lay my plate down because the prongs can vary from tag to tag, so there's no set factual what it's going to be every time. So that is how I do that. Press that down into place. And then you can use duct tape on the back. You could also use a little piece of stabilizer behind if you would like to. I'll go ahead and duct tape it. And I like to use white duct tape, so that's what I do. And then you can decide, okay, does the front have that zipper pocket or does the back? I'm gonna say the back for me, has a zipper pocket. So we'll go ahead and grab our upper exterior panel. We'll clip that into place. I like to use the rainbow metal hair clips for when I'm sewing something together that just needs a gentle hold. So I don't need a death grip on those pieces. We're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And as I'm sewing that, I can just swipe those pins away. So that is my preference for those. And then we are going to top stitch this through that fabric. Now, if you're using a material that may seem a little too bulky, we can steal a little bulk reduction technique from Knotted Threads Co. We're going to cut that seam at maybe 1/2 inch, whatever feels right, and we can butterfly that open there, but make the bulk of it go up where we're top stitching through. And that is so when we start to put that all together, we're not top stitching through a really bulky spot. If you're using a thinner vinyl, you don't have to do this. If you know your machine can handle the bulk, you also don't have to do this. I just kind of like to practice it here and there. And then we're going to pivot down to baste that into place. I think that looks really sweet. Oh, dang it. The layers shifted on me anyway. All right. And then if you wanted to simplify this bag even further, you could omit that front zippered pocket. I do not want to simplify it, so I am not going to omit that front pocket. Okay? Okay. So what we will do, we're going to line up the center mark and that top edge. Yeah. And trace that. Okay, and then if you are for some reason worried that your stitching might come loose, what we're going to do is just do a quick little back stitch at the side seam underneath our marked line. It has to go under because otherwise you would be cutting it away again, which is not what we want to do. And you can cut that away. Honestly, I don't normally do this. I lay the lining piece down in that spot because it already has the cut and go from there. Just make sure you find the center. But when I do that, I make sure I mark out my 3/8 inch seam allowance, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do that anyway. And that's just gonna help you know where to pivot and keep the shape consistent. And while you're there, you could even mark out the line you need to snip. Because you don't need to cut everything away, you just need to make those relief snips in that area. I'm gonna go ahead and bump my stitch length down for this part. And make sure my needle hits right where it needs to. When you're working with vinyl, you don't want your stitch length to be too small, or you're just gonna end up perforating it depending on what kind you use. And then before I go back to top stitching, make sure you adjust that seam allowance back. All right, we've snipped right next to, but not through our stitches. I'm gonna press the lining away first, give it a nice crease. And this will help when you turn it, keep all those layers. Because then you just need to crease one part flat. The other is already good to go. It sits so nicely. That's one thing I love about the waterproof materials that I carry, the waterproof canvas light and the Renew. They hold a crease very nicely when you want them to. Okay. One thing I've kind of played around with the idea of in my head, but I've never done it, is top stitching this at like 3/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch now, and then adding the zipper, but I've just never done it. I'm like, well, I don't know, because like everything else has 2 lines of stitching, except I guess the top accent, so I've just been like, it's fine. So I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it, girl. I'm just thinking about it. But we are gonna add our zipper. You wanna line that up with the side edges, and we're also gonna line that up with the top of the bag. And you can glue or tape or just gently lay that in place. So the top edge of your zipper tape is in line with the top edge of your bag. We've increased our seam allowance. And we're just gonna go slow. Making sure that the distance between the vinyl and the teeth of the zipper looks pretty even. And then we'll pivot across like that. And that is the zipper secured. And now we need to close off that pocket. So we're gonna flip that over. You don't need to baste the lining to the top of the zipper, but if you really want to, you can. And then I'm gonna sew this and pivot down at the bottom and come back up to the top. And then that gets basted to the bottom of the bag. And I am not worried about catching the very bottom of the other side of the lining. I am in my initial sewing of the pocket shut, so there's no hole in the bag. But otherwise, I don't want the excess bulk down in that seam with those 2 layers. And I'm even gonna trim this away a little bit more. It's not that bulky, but I still am like, that little bit is gonna, it's gonna ruin the tour. Okay, we're gonna grab our other, thanks, upper exterior, and press that into place. If you know that on your machine you can't get that 3/8 inch stitch length up against, or 3/8 inch seam allowance up against a zipper, I would trim that upper piece down by 1/4 of an inch and then attach it to your bag. And then I did that little bulk reduction on one side, so I'm going to do it on the other. Pressing that seam open on this side, and then the bulk of the zipper pocket towards the top so that we're top stitching on that accent. And then if you were not successful in making your zipper tape even, like when you top stitch that top piece on, if the distance wasn't quite right, you can kind of fudge it by just folding this top panel a little bit down more. It'll be fine. It'll look all right in the end, but I just think this looks so sweet. So what we can do now, we still need to top stitch all of our connectors, but we can sew one side of this together right now. So I will go ahead and do that. You want to line up those accent pieces. And this is again 3/8. And then I'm going to top stitch that flat. You don't actually have to add the side connectors if you wanted to simplify this bag even more. You could skip it, but it's definitely part of the style. But if you just wanted to make it a more simplified crossbody, you just add a D-ring. To the top seam and call it a day. All right, we can leave that right there for now. And we'll grab all of those connectors. Okay, all four, yes. Okay. Go home, Alexander. Oh, Lord. All right. We are going to fold those connectors to the center. You do not need to leave a gap in between this fold, unless for some reason maybe you did not cut your pieces to 2 inches wide. Whatever you need to make them a true 1 inch wide in the end of folding. And this is optional, but I like to do this 3/8 inch top stitch. I found that doing this when I tested the bag helped you know that you have it in the center because it lines up perfectly with your top stitching on the side panels. And I was like, oh, that's fun. Because a lot of the top stitching on that side panel gets covered up by these connectors anyway. These are going to be folded so I'm not worried about back stitching. You're not going to see that raw end, and it'll be top stitched again. So like it's not going anywhere, you know. Oh my gosh, this pink stitching on the mint is just precious. Back stitching isn't going to hurt, it's just not super necessary. So do what makes you happy. Alrighty. So now on 2 of the connectors we need 1-inch square rings. And then on the other 2 we need 1-inch D-rings. Well, successfully have not found the other D-ring. Maybe it never existed. So we'll finish the exterior another time. Well, I guess I could both of those. All right, what I like to do is I will make a mark, double what is required for me to fold down to attach those. And then I'm going to add double-sided tape up to that line, just a little bit under, no, yeah. No, a little bit over, but I can put a little bit there. And that is where our square ring is going to go. The square ring is just for looks. You can hang your keychains or trinkets off of it if you'd like, but other than that, it's just to look cool. And it does, I think it does. So one of these is for the other side, which I have to do later, and one is for now. And then on the top piece, we're just going to place double-sided tape all over that and peel that up. This slides in, and then this slides on, and we'll just make those match. And then more double-sided tape on that. Oh yeah, and that's for the other side. I was like, what is this? Can't do anything with it. Great. Can't do anything with the bottom panel either. So the last thing we can do on the exterior right now is top stitch this side. The other side is a little bit harder. Jenny loves to throw in those little tricky biscuits. So we're going to lay this down. If you used a different kind of hardware for your square ring connector, you want to make sure that this D-ring comes up about an inch. So you should have an inch here before the D-ring starts. We're going to top stitch that. And if you want to add rivets, you can. Adding rivets can either be a cool look or a great way to show that your rivets are uneven or that your stitching is uneven. So pick your poison, babe. And because this connector is square, well, it's a rectangle, you can't really easily hide a back stitch. So I am leaving long thread tails and as best as I can pulling that thread to the back. So there is our, as of right now, finished. Found the D-ring. Just kidding. It's gone forever. No clue where it went. So we'll go ahead and finish our lining while we're in that mode set. Maybe Lauren will have edited everything back in order. Kind of doubt it. And the D-ring will be on top. Wrong way. Yeah, wrong way. Now I can't lose that. So to finish off the exterior, we'll do right sides together, lining everything up best we can. And that's a 3/8 inch seam allowance the whole way down. We will open that up to top stitch, but I'm going to pivot that a little bit, press it open before we top stitch. And I keep my hand underneath and a hand on top, pressing and making sure that nothing turns where it shouldn't. then we're gonna pivot, keeping that seam pressed flat. And come back down. And I've got my hand underneath and on top, making sure it's pressed down. And now do not add that bottom panel. You have to add your connector. So we're going to peel off the tape. And we'll add another little chunk of tape here. Okay, and that's going to go over where we just top stitched, lining up the bottom first. And then that top stitch line just makes it that much easier to center. So we've got that placed, and I'm going to start at the bottom. And if you would like to mark where to start and stop to kind of match that on both sides of your bag, you can. So we've got that one done. And so for this one, I move the top piece out of the way and go like that. So it's not too bad. I like to start in the middle, leaving long threads. We'll pivot. Hold that thread out of the way and sew to it. And then just be really, really, really careful you don't snap your threads while you're trying to pull them to the back. If you have to tug too hard, they might not come out. They'll just break, and then you'll be sad. And sometimes I'm like, well, if it's not going to come out with me yanking on it, probably not going to come out at all. So it's fine. All right, we'll grab the base and we're going to attach that to the exterior bottom of the bag. Line that up, and this is going to be a 3/8 inch seam allowance. We'll flip that down and top stitch through. And repeat that on the other side. And if you used consistent seam allowance and things were cut perfectly, that should line up just right. and we'll press that open, kind of just shifting the rest of the bag out of the way. And now we're ready to close up the bottom. And we've got our centers marked. I'm gonna line that up flat. Same for the other side. We know where the center is. We'll lay that flat. Clipping that all together. And 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so we've got our exterior complete. We're ready to move on to the lining. I'm going to start with our slip pocket. So we're going to grab one of our main lining, our slip pocket accent, and our slip pocket pieces. I've cut mine to longer than they need to be. As long as the top and bottom are straight though, I don't care. So we're gonna do a 3/8 inch at the bottom. We're gonna press one side open. And we'll flip the seam. And we've got a nice bottom crease, but I want to top stitch the top right now. You could also tape that shut. I just don't want it kind of flipping while I work to add the accent, so that's totally optional. Just my personal preference. We're going to peel one side of that accent and line up the top edge. Then we'll fold this over on top. And if you like to add a woven label, this is a good spot for it. I'll do a little stay positive. It's not quite paw, but it's stay positive. Okay. And this goes 1.5 inches up from the bottom. And I've just made a deep center crease so that I know where to kind of top stitch up to. And then you can also add a rivet at the top of your slip pocket if you would like. So we'll start on the side here, kind of angling down. And then we're going to sew across. And I'm getting to that deep center crease. So I'm going to stop at about 1/8 of an inch from it and come up. This is my preference. You can also just do the one. Come across about 1/4 and then come back down. And then I'll back stitch to kind of connect the lines. Evermore's playing with something. Oh. So up to the top. And then we'll just cut away the excess fabric from the back side. It's so cute. And then yeah, you could add little rose gold rivet there if you'd like for extra security. Just make sure you're not stitching or cutting through your stitches. All right, we'll add our zipper pocket overlay. And this goes 1.5 inches down from the top. I'm using a 12-inch ruler. This is my 2.5 inch by 12, and it's one of my favorites to keep at my sewing machine. So I'm going to find the center of my ruler. And then I know that we're going to have about 1/2 inch overhang on either side of this overlay. So I'm just centering that. Now that it's centered, I'll press evenly in either direction. And then because I am who I am, I'm gonna add a little woven label here. All right. So I'm starting in a point on the side here. Thread tail's long. And I'm just going to slowly stitch around that curved edge. Pulling my thread to the back. And then we'll cut away the excess fabric, not the overlay. And I like to use a nice sharp pair of scissors to just glide across the fiber. And that helps me know that I'm not cutting through anything I don't want to. And there's that. And then we could tie this some more. Oh, so pretty. All right, there's that. And then our lining for the zipper pocket. I accidentally cut one of these shorter, but I know that the longer piece goes to the top, the shorter goes to the bottom. So I do need additional zipper tape. And I like for my zipper tape to be on the floor, just everything on the floor. A little bit wider, a little bit longer than it needs to be. Just makes it easier for me. I'm gonna attach that zipper pull. Okay, this one is the bottom because it's shorter and my zipper pull is going that way. So this, yes. I am basting that on at 1/4 of an inch. And then pressing that open. You want to see the right side of your zipper with the wrong side of your lining, because when you unzip the right side and look into the other side, you'll see the right side of your fabric. And so now we can see that even though I cut these wrong, they are correct, because you got to trim one down later usually. And I guess my brain just was like, here, have that. Okay. All right. And then you can top stitch those open if you need to. I definitely have had to with some materials, but I feel like with a waterproof canvas light, like, it's pretty good. You don't have to. So I'm gonna add double-sided tape there and there. And I used to be team sew around it all at once, and then I was bullied into not being team sew it all around at once. So we're gonna flip the bottom lining of that zipper pocket up and away. We're gonna center all of those in here. And I'm going to stitch just the bottom line with long thread tails. We're going to pull those through and tie it off. And also, no shame if you're doing it the other way, okay? No shame. I love that. It's easier. You don't have to be as agile with your fingers to tie that off, like whatever works for you. We'll press that down and out of the way, and then we'll press the top side of that zipper, peel it and press it. I am just pressing it from this side because there really isn't much I can do at this point if I didn't already perfect the placement, and I didn't, but it'll work. So then I'm going to start with the side of the zipper where there is no zipper pull, because my teeth are perfectly aligned right now. I'm going to pivot. And stitch along the top. Depending on how big the zipper pull you're using is, you may need to stop sewing sooner, but I'm leaving my needle down. I'm going to push my zipper pull in. See that little section there? And then we're going to pivot down and sew that. If they don't meet up, just kind of fake that they do. Make another little stitch, it'll be all right. Pull your threads to the back. What you want to do is you want to grab the tail that you can see and pull up, and you'll start to see a loop, and that's when you can take your snips or a little seam ripper and pull that up, and then you'll tie off. And the reason I cut my zipper tape longer than I needed to is because I like to have my pull way off to the side, out of the way. It's not necessary. Some people even add their zipper pull after they've done some stitching and then add it, and I'm just like, this is what works for me. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then you could add a little bit of glue to these knots if you want. Just make sure you've tested that glue and it's not going to seep or stain the fabrics you're using. We can cut our excess just right onto the floor. Excess zipper tape off. We'll save that for Dorothy. She likes playing with stuff like that. Okay, and then we're gonna sew this, leaving the bottom open to turn the bag through. Still works. All right, zipper panel and bottom. Man, I wish I had that D-ring. So frustrating. I'd be done because it's so cute. Okay, I'm gonna tape this and I'm gonna call it, because it's midnight. So I've just got my tape at the 1-inch line, and then we're gonna fold those. I don't fold until I'm ready to sew because it could lift. But we've got our upper lining panels and our bottom panel lining ready to go to put all that together tomorrow. zipper pull, zipper. Go ahead and prep. My main zipper should be about 14 to 16. I'll cut that now. And I will be back before you know I'm gone. So all that was left for us is our recessed zipper panel for the lining. So I'm going to go ahead and add my zipper to my zipper tape. And we're going to turn our zipper tape at an angle. And I like to just use my lighter for this. Melt all that together. And then do the other side.
What are you doing?
Working. So we're working on folding our lining zipper panel pieces to meet the 1-inch line that we traced when we were cutting the bag out. This is the equivalent of folding at 1/2 inch. And for me, it just makes more sense to measure that 1 inch and fold 2 than try to carefully measure 1/2 inch when you're trying to fold. I am adding 1/8 inch double-sided tape to where our zipper is going to go. So if you've got something that's directional and you need help kind of figuring out which is which, I find that to be very helpful. So we'll start with our exterior. One exterior, one lining. And we'll place that zipper pull face down. And I'm doing about 1/4 inch from the beginning of that zipper panel. And we'll sew that at 1/4 inch. I'll be honest, I just did like a scant 1/4 inch because I'm used to doing a 3/8. So it'll be okay. It just means that our zipper panel will be a little bit not as wide. So I'm creasing one side first and then flipping it over. I find that to be much easier than trying to crease them both at the same time. And then I start stitching where it won't be seen. And finish that off in the corner that will be within the seam. Oh. Well, thanks, Bobbin. That was nice. Just in time. We'll go ahead and add this other side. You can start with the lining or the exterior. I'm going to start with the lining just to line up those panels and press it up against the edge of the zipper. And it's best to do this while things are laying flat. You don't want to line this up while it's in your hand because things might curve in a way that you don't want them to. We'll line that up. Pinch it all flat. And then again, it's that 1/4 inch. You can move your zipper pull out of the way if you need to. And if your vinyl is a little bit thick maybe, or your material, you can do some bulk reduction by trimming away some of that zipper panel in the seam. So there is that complete. And we're going to fold and mark the center of that. We're going to grab the side of our lining that has the zipper pull. That way our zippers are zipping in the same direction. Find the center notches and baste that down. And then we're going to add the top lining panel, lining up the center. And we'll sew that at 1/4 inch. Nope, 3/8. 3/8. And then we're going to top stitch on the exterior top panel, or the lining panel, so that the zipper panel is pointing down into the bag. I did make one where I top stitched it the other way and it was totally fine, so if you mess up, you could flip that if need be. And you could do that same little bulk reduction that we did on the outside of the bag as well, where we snipped about halfway and butterflied it open. But I think we'll be just fine. And then we're going to grab the other side of our lining, line that up. We're going to baste that into place. Three-eighths inch. Make sure your zipper pull is totally out of the way. top stitch through. And we're going to finish off the lining by sewing the side seams together, and then we'll attach the base. For the lining, you want to start at a 3/8 inch so that the exterior and the lining top edge match. And then once we get past the top of the lining, we're going to increase to about a half. And then getting back to the bottom, go back to that 3/8. And we're going to trim some of this down. And repeat that on the other side. Starting at 3/8, slowly increasing to that 1/2 inch. And then coming back to 3/8. And then if you're worried about any stitching coming out or loosening over time, you could add another little row of stitching into that seam. And now we'll unzip our lining. Grab the bottom panel and open up the side seam. And we're going to sew that in place at a 1/2 inch. Since this is the lining, we're increasing that seam allowance. And then I like to top stitch that just like we did the exterior. Good thing it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just cut right through that, man. And that seam will be pointing down. And now we have our center lines already notched when we cut the bag out, and you're only going to sew one side shut. And that's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're gonna leave the other open to birth the bag through. And we're gonna trim down that seam allowance. If you're worried about stitches coming loose, again, you could do another little stitch line next to it if you wished. But now we want to turn our lining right side out. I prefer to do bags with exterior wrong side out and lining right side out, putting them together. And I'll press open that side seam and clip it for now. All right, now that our lining's done, we can go ahead and place that inside. I like my zipper pocket to be at the back of the bag. And that means I have 2 zipper pockets on the back, but it's all right. Set that inside, making sure your zipper is out of the way. Make sure your zipper is unzipped. You could totally make this bag with a drop-in lining if you'd prefer. Lining up the center marks and our side seams. Also, make sure that your D-ring hardware is pressed down and out of the way. Otherwise, you might accidentally sew through it, which would be bad, bad, bad. And then we're just going to gently pull to line everything up. Clipping that all together, and then we'll top stitch around the top edge. This is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you accidentally did half or a quarter, it would probably be okay, but try to stick to that 3/8. And there's no need to trim any of that down. So we're going to pull this through. We left a large opening in the bottom so that we don't have to risk hitting any of our material on our zipper tape. And it's just a little bit bigger of a hole. So we're pushing all of that through. Really pretty. Now what we can do is turn the pocket out and grab the interior bottom through that, and we will sew that together. And this is that 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Making sure to pull that seam so it sits flat. And I'll trim that down. We'll press that back in. And roll the lining down inside the bag. critter is saved. And we're just rolling that seam between our fingers to make sure it's up as high as it can go. And then I'll clip that all together. I don't know why I like to do this before I sew that pocket shut, because that closes off everything to the bag, and I just want to make sure that everything sits nicely. The lining sits pretty perfectly. So then we can sew this shut. And I'll trim those threads, and then I'll melt them. Is so cute, and it has this like gentle slouch to it that you can kind of manipulate. So now we're ready to top stitch. So place that under the foot of the machine. I like to make sure I can see both of my threads. And then make sure everything stays out of the way. Make sure your zipper panel isn't creeping up. And there, that is complete. You can zip that shut. We'll add our zipper end hardware and rivet the straps. So I'll trim that excess off the zipper. Make sure to take a lighter to it. And then I've got my zipper end here. If you're worried you're going to lose the screw, you can grab a magnet to Make sure you don't lose the screw, it'll hold on to it. And I've got an electric screwdriver. You could add some glue. I don't think you have to. The screw will hold that on pretty well. And sometimes adding too much glue means it could seep out or something. So that is complete there. Then I'll show you what those straps look like clipped on, and I'll rivet them off camera. It is so bright and happy. I love it so much. So that is it for making the Harmonica Hobo. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I know I had such a blast cutting this bag, sewing this bag. It's one of my new favorites. I hope you'll grab the pattern. Don't forget to subscribe to Jenny's channel. Don't forget to check out the Emporium, and then don't forget to check out Mormino for hardware and other materials. And if I didn't already say it, don't forget to subscribe to me. Okay, bye. Good luck editing this, Lauren. Critter babies. You aqua scum. I have no doubt it freaking fell though. Don't see it. Oh, she's gonna scream. God, where's my D-ring? Go ask him. You gotta get off the cords though. You're shaking my camera, and I'm worried you're gonna hurt the lights or yourself. She walked upstairs and hit me with the. Oh, don't come down here.